Hello and welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Sepping. Today I'm going to show you how I'm sewing my scraps together to make little Hexi flowers that will eventually be one amazing scrap quilt, probably a decade at minimum from now. But what I've done, and you can watch some video tutorials on this, is I fussy cut all of my fabrics from a scrap project that I did, and to have them coordinate and show off my favorite parts of the fabric. And then I have one white background Hexi that's going to go on the side. So I'm going to show you today how I sew these together and then how they look when they all come together someday in the very far future from now. You need some pre-basted Hexis to start with, and if you need to know how to do that and how to fussy cut them, I've got videos walking you through that process. And then you're going to need some coordinating thread. I like to use 50 weight Aurifil thread in a coordinating color. For some of these that I put together, pink was definitely the color to go with, but for this one, I think I'm going to choose my darker lagoon color. A needle minder is really helpful. This will clip to your shirt and will give your needle a place to go so you don't lose it. This is especially helpful if you are sewing in public. And I don't need this anymore for Hexis, but when I'm doing other complicated EPP, I like to have one basing clip to help me hold things in place and be kind of a second pair of hands. I'm going to start by taking about length of thread from my arm to my elbow. Now I'm going to take my needle minder and I'm just going to stick it right on like where you would a lapel pin. That way my needle can be there when I'm not using it, like right now. See, it just clips and stays there and I don't have to worry about it going anywhere. But we do need it right now. So we're going to take the end that we snipped last and we're going to feed that through our needle. And then we're going to do what's called a quilter's knot. And to do that, what you do is you take your thread and it's going in the opposite direction of the pointy end of your needle, and we're going to wrap it around 4 times. And then what you do is you slide those wraps down and pinch it between your thumb and your forefinger and push your needle up while pinching those wraps all the way down to the end, and then you have a tiny little knot that will hold everything in place at the bottom. I use this knot all the time, mostly for binding, but that is by far the easiest one to use for this. Now, we have all of our Hexis here, and we're going to essentially sew one of these at a time to our center Hexi. So the first thing I want to do is make sure that I have everything arranged the way I want. I took a lot of care in fussy cutting all of these so that way everything would be in the same spot, because I just wanted to have a lot of attention to detail with this quilt because it's supposed to be a memory of all the projects that I've worked on over the years. And this was actually the fabric that made me decide I want to do this because it was so cool and I love the way that it turned out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my top one and I'm going to put that right sides together. And I always sew from right to left because I am right-handed. So if you are left-handed, that might be something to think about. I'm going to go ahead and move these to the side for now so you guys can concentrate on the Hexi. Now, if you are a beginner, it might be helpful to take a clip and put it on the side here. That way you're going to have access to your entire top row as you're stitching, and you'll be good to go there. Now there's all kinds of ways to do hand sewing for Hexis. This is just one of them. So if you have another way that you like to do it, that's totally fine as long as it works for you and the stitches are mostly invisible when you're done with it. But what I like to do is I like to start right in the corner that I'm going to stitch across. So my first thing, I'm going to stitch these guys together so when I open it up, I've got my top Hexi sewn to my owl. And I want to get that right in the corner. And what you're doing is you are feeling with your needle to make sure you're not going through that cardstock template, but you're just right above it. And that can take some figuring out in order to figure that out. So I do a second stitch there just to make sure my corners are nice and secure. Always do 2 stitches at the corners. And now what you want to do is I kind of rock my needle a little bit so that way I can feel it go above through the fabric, but above the cardstock template. And you can see that I've got a nice good chunk of fabric there. I don't just have a couple threads, I got a good chunk of fabric. And if I can, I will kind of grab that thread tail in there, but I don't worry about it too much if I don't, because it'll all end up on the back of the quilt eventually anyway. And what you want to aim for is at least 12 stitches per side of the Hexi. These are called 1-inch Hexis because this side finishes at 1 inch. So if you can get 12 stitches in that area, then you're good. I kind of just eyeball it, and I usually end up getting about 15 or 16 stitches, which is also fine. You're not going to hurt anything if you do a few more. What you don't want to have is a lot less, because then you're going to have problems with things not staying together, especially if you choose to machine quilt it when it's all said and done. But I'm just going to keep rocking that stitch. I kind of rock up and over, and it's a tight fit when you're going through there. Some people kind of like to have like a needle gripper to help with that, especially if you have hand problems. That can be helpful. I'm just going to finish working my way across. All right, I'm coming up to the final corner, so I'm going to go through both of those corners. So there's my first stitch and there's my second stitch. Now this thread is going to stay live because we're going to add another piece onto this, so we don't need to worry about knotting anything off. I am going to remove my clip because we need to open it back up here. All right, so what I like to do here, especially when I fussy cut everything and I have everything going in a very specific way, is put everything back in place. This is kind of like when you're sewing your 9 patches together and you lay it out to make sure everything is where it should be. And I should have this little part of a flower in the same corner of each hexie, which I do. All right, so we have our thread coming out right here, which means the next seam I want to sew is sewing these together here, and then I'm going to break my thread. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to flip that right sides together. If you would like to clip it, you can. I have done this enough times to where I do not need to clip it. So what I do is I just pick it up, and making sure that my edges are together, I'm going to first stitch through those corners. I want to make sure that those are matched up as close as I can get them. And I'm going to do 2 stitches through there just for good measure. It makes me feel good that I got a nice secure corner that's not going to come apart. And then I'm going to keep stitching across, and if you need to do any maneuvering, because sometimes the fold over the fabric isn't the same on each one, to make sure that your edges are even over on this side too, go ahead and do that. But you can also use a clip if you need to as well. All right, I am to my end again, and I am going to, this time I took my first stitch in the corner. Now I'm going to take my second stitch in the corner, and before I pull that loop all the way, I'm going to put my needle through it to kind of close it off a little bit. And then I'm going to do that one more time to give myself a good knot. And then what I do, I flatten it out, and I'm going to take my needle and I'm just going to put it, kind of hide it through the thread of the fabrics. That way it's kind of coming in right by the corner and it's coming out towards the edge. You cannot travel like this the way you would if you were hand quilting, but it is a good way to kind of get the tail of your thread away from the corner so that you don't have thread tails hanging out everywhere. And now we need to start attaching this side here. I'm going to start again with that quilter's knot, and then you can see this is the section that is next to go. So I'm going to start at the edge, and this part can feel a little tricky when you're getting the hang of it. You want to kind of take your finger and push this out so that it is kind of curved a little bit. And this is where, if you want to use a clip to try to keep this together, I would put it right here. That way it's out of the way of where you're going to be sewing, and it'll be a little easier to hang on to. And you only need to bring 1 clip and 1 needle and your matching thread with you if you're doing this on the go, which I find to be quite nice, because sometimes when you're bringing sewing projects on the go, it can just be a little much, you know, to have all the things. And the needle minder is a huge game changer. I used to do stuff like this without it, and I would be at kids' activities and I would lose my needle and I would panic. And so this works out really well. All right, so I'm going to stitch to the end, and then we're just going to keep adding blocks and keep going like this until we have made it all the way around. So I made my way around my initial flower, and you can see that the stitches, while you can see them just a teeny bit, they are very almost invisible from the right side, and that's because they were so small and they were made with coordinating thread. Now I do have one more bit to attach. This is going to be kind of my negative space when I attach all of my hexes together, and that is to put one of my background hexes on the right side of the hexi. So we can see I've got my owl going up right here. So here's my right side. I'm going to kind of turn it so that the fabric is going straight of grain there. And I'm just going to stitch from here to here, going around there. Again, you can use your clips if you want. I'm not going to because I've done a ton of these, but feel free to use them if you feel like you need to. So I'm just going to flip that right sides together. And I'm going to start on this side, and then we're going to turn and work our way that way. If you were to clip on this one, it's a little different because we're kind of an inset. You're going to have to clip on the center there, which is why I prefer to not do it because it kind of gets in the way. So I'm going to leave mine out and just kind of pinch things together with my fingers. Grab my needle from my needle minder, and we're going to get started in that corner. Again, making sure to do 2 rounds through each corner, just for good measure. From there, everything is the same. And as long as you're taking tiny stitches, you will not see this on the white. All right, I've hit the corner. So again, we're going to do 2 through that corner, and then we're going to flip it around, and we're going to line it up so that my edges are together. Here, it's really easy to use a clip if you want to. Just put it right there and it stays out of the way. And I'm going to, again, go through the 2 corners. This helps make sure everything is nice and lined up. Do a second here. Now we're just going to stitch through to the end, just like we've been doing all around. All right, so here we have our adorable little hexie. Everything's been fussy cut, so it looks absolutely fabulous and a work of art all on its own to commemorate the fabric that I used for this project. And I want to show you how these all fit together. So my thought is that someday I will do this according to color order. So these are all reading more teal, so they would all kind of live together. And then I would probably go into some dark blue or something after this. But for the sake of showing you how this all comes together, I'm going to go ahead and put together some of the pinks in there. You can see just how cute this is. That little white hexie gives it this just enough space to give the eye a place to rest, so you can see each hexie as its own entity. But it also is really allows each hexagon to stand on its own when we have it as our own little block. And then these are also very easy to store. You could put them in a clear acrylic bin. I use scrapbook cases for all of my ongoing projects. And once I feel like I have enough, I'm going to sew them all into a quilt. So that tutorial is probably going to be a very long time from now because I have a lot of hand sewing to do, and I really honestly want it to take several years. I want this to be a commemoration of all the projects that I work on over at least like the next couple of years until I feel like I have enough to do a fairly large size quilt. But when you do go to put it together, it's going to be real similar to what we've been doing, where you'll just stitch and put your pieces together as you work. I mean, maybe what you would want to do is do some rows where you stitch, these guys together and then go stitch up and down going across. But I do want to show you one more thing that's important, because one question is, do we have to keep the papers in there? And the answer is you only have to keep them until all of the sides are sewn in, because that's what helps keep the shape, so that way everything goes together beautifully. So in this case, the only hexagon where I've encased all 6 of the sides is my center one. So I can take and pop that out. I can just pop the glue. This glue has probably been on since August. I have left glue on a lot longer than that, like years, and still been able to pop it out just fine. And then this is reusable. You can't reuse them a million times because they do get a little damage, and you can almost see there's like a perforation on all the sides from where I went through with my needle and just kind of rocked it over the top of that. This actually looks like it was maybe one of the very original ones that I did, where I used to hand baste them together before I discovered the glue stick. But this can go back in my tub to be reused for another Hexi. And I've got my adorable little start of a epic Hexi quilt that is a memory of all the quilts I've ever worked on. Now, if you love this and you want to get the supplies to get going on it, I've got an affiliate link where you can go shop at Fat Quarter Shop. It will get you everything you need to make the Hexis, the cardboard templates, the template that I use to fussy cut everything with. They have Aurifil thread, they have needle minders, they have the glue sticks, they have everything you need to do it. So check out the other videos I've done on how I store everything and how I fussy cut to make this look really cool. And then you can go to town and start stitching them together and start your own really cool scrap Hexi quilt. All right, until next time, happy quilting.